I'm Anne Marie Mitroff, the River Program Director for Groundwork USA, and my colleague Deanna Toledo with River Network is also in the room. We're your coordinators of the Urban Waters Learning Network. One of the network's purposes is to actually help you with your job so that we can all do a better job with water. And that's very much about what today's webinar is about, exposing you to a program that's a really terrific one, and it might just suit your waterways program. I want to introduce Doug Evans with the National Park Service Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program. He's sort of dear to our heart at Groundwork, as he started the Groundwork initiative with a colleague of his about 20 years ago. And he's led the initiative over this whole time, and it's dramatic growth, now over 20 Groundwork trusts around the country. And we've even received at Groundwork Hudson Valley assistance in the early daylighting dreams of the Sawmill River. And Groundwork Denver has just had a more recent and terrific experience. So this is something that you should really use. Doug, Charles, Stacy, and Catherine, who are going to present to you the RTCA program. Take it away, Doug.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Doug Evans, and I am manager of the Groundwork program, as Anne Marie mentioned. And I've invited 3 of my colleagues to join me today. Let's see. And we're going to be talking about the Rivers and Trails program. The goal is to give you a quick overview of what the program does, and then to actually look at 3 different projects in different parts of the country, and those will be presented by my colleagues, and then close with an overview of the application process. So to introduce our panel, hopefully you all have the slide with the 4 of us. As I said, I'll be doing the overview. Charlie Tracy will talk about SoCo Blueway, Massachusetts. Stacy will be talking about the Lafitte Greenway in New Orleans. And then Catherine will wrap it up with the Montopolis Watershed Trails in Austin. Each of us has been with the Rivers and Trails program for a long time. We have a lot of experience, and I think we must have over 50 years experience in this business, or maybe even over 70 years experience. So it means that we're all getting a little older. As a point of being honest about pictures, my picture was taken a few years ago, and actually I have a few more gray hairs than I did in that picture. So moving on to talk about the Rivers and Trails program and give a quick overview. RTCA, as the acronym is a small program within the National Park Service, and the goal is to bring the expertise and visibility of the National Park Service to local projects to improve access to rivers and trails and improve parks and green space, and to build stewardship and engage communities in doing that work. So as you can see from this slide, we support community-led projects. We are a national network of conservation and recreation planning professionals based across the country. And what's nice about that is it enables us to work on site with you to help move your projects along. Not Groundwork, but RTCA partners with community groups, nonprofits, tribes, state and local governments. And most importantly, partners with the people who live in those communities where the projects are being undertaken. The type of work that RTCA gets involved in is improving access to rivers and waterfronts and working on conservation of those areas, improving parks and green space, building trails on both land and water, developing new recreation opportunities for communities, and in my mind, most importantly, promoting stewardship. I think that's one of the keys to moving these projects forward. As I mentioned, RTCA provides on-site assistance and at no cost to the local community. And as you can see from this list here, there's a number of different types of roles that RTCA can be involved in. As we hear from my three colleagues on their specific projects, we'll get some specific ideas of the work that they did to help move their projects along. There is one word in this list that I think is the most important word, and that's engage. Engage partners, community members, government officials, funders, building visibility for the project and helping to move it forward. In our mind, if you don't have the backing of the community, then the project does not have a great chance of being there for the long term. So I think that's one of the best things that RTCA can do is to help you engage your partners and your community members and get involved in the work that you're doing. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our first RTCA project example, and that would be the SoCo Blueways from Charlie Tracy. And then we'll move on to Lafitte Greenway and then Montopolis Watershed Trails. Charlie? You're in charge.
Thanks, Doug. I chose this image to start off with because, like Doug, just trying to distill down what we really do and what we deliver, I thought this picture just captured a lot. Our goal is engagement, and you can see everybody in this picture is excited and engaged. Maybe some of them are a little nervous. But I think it also shows at least in my work with water trails, my goal is to engage and particularly to get young people involved. There's all kinds of water trails all over the country, but for me, a water trail is about getting especially young people in urban areas to connect and get out on the water. So SoCo Blueways means South Coast. It's the South Coast of Massachusetts. It's in and around New Bedford and Buzzards Bay, which is to connect with EPA. It's a Superfund site, so parts of it are being cleaned up, and parts of it we are using this water trail project to celebrate the natural and the cultural history in and around New Bedford. This is where Herman Melville got on a whaling ship and was inspired to write the Moby Dick, for example. But I think also the Park Service, the Park Service guy there right in the middle, he's holding the boat and he's part of it, but everybody else is involved too. And I kind of like that because I think it shows what our role is. So I feel like it's a good metaphor for the project. And then in terms of, say, a practical strategy, one of the things we're doing on SoCo Blueways this summer is sponsoring a series of free kayaking tours for young people. And then later in the summer, we're going to have family tours that they can invite their friends and family to be part of. Excuse me. Excuse me. I'm trying to give a lecture. Can you guys? It's an active place here. Okay, so that's what's going on with that one. The practical strategies part, we really focus on action. I sort of was chuckling when Doug was showing one of those sheets about all the different activities that we do, and I was thinking, well, that's maybe what the people in Washington think we do, but we really focus on the practical, moving from plans or designs into action, getting our feet wet. But I put this slide up to show that we have the Park Service, and we bring in these practical strategies that we've learned from our colleagues all around the country. We get a sense of what works best for, in this case, for water trails. So here's a few examples. One of the first things we did was help this group set up a website, a Facebook page, and then underneath that is an interactive online map which shows all the different access points for this water trail as it's coming together. But the engagement part too, instead of just going out and assessing these ourselves, I got in touch with a local university and some of their students engaged their students in helping us to do the assessment of all these sites. We had special assessment sheets, and that provided the data for all those red dots. So when you click on those, it tells you, what kind of launch site it is, some of the background about it, a picture of it, things like that. Another practical strategy in terms of the partnership is one of our partners you can see on that is above the Park Service logo is the Whaling History Alliance. Since this area is incredibly beautifully naturally, but also has lots of history and culture, and we're working with them to try and bring in other parts of other stories to tell to engage people with the waterfront. The last thing I'd like to show is another strategy, again, focused more towards getting younger people involved with the so-called Blue Ways project. We had an artist who I'd worked with before, and I asked her to think of some way that we could, some kind of temporary art installation that might help to animate and bring life to the project as a whole, and also draw our attention to these launching sites. So she came up with the idea of putting temporary graphics on some of the launch sites, and the graphics that she drew on were some of the old sea shanties that people would sing as they were setting sail out of New Bedford Harbor to chase whales. So the young people's part of this, too, is we're working with a gallery and some young graphic artists who will assist her in, actually, this is just a sample one, but will assist her in applying the graphics to the different places. So that's, we use art in all different ways, but it's just another way to, it's just another strategy to get more people involved within a community, because maybe not everybody's a kayaker, but they might be interested in the art or helping with the mapping or even going on some of the tours. That's all I have on my end. Doug, I guess I could pass it back to you.
Thanks, Charlie. And for our next project, I'd like to move on to the Lafitte Greenway, and presented by my colleague Stacy Palmer McBride in New Orleans. Stacy?
Hi, everyone. Unfortunately, I don't have as many exciting pictures as many as Charles had, but I have a lot of renderings because it's still in the process of going on. However, it still is a really exciting project. In about 2006, a friends group of the Lafitte Corridor came to me for assistance with this project that came with this concept and this idea. Well, ordinarily when we work with communities and interested parties, it's a little more basic, but this group was really, really advanced in their ideas and their concepts, so they were only looking for pretty much connections. So because the Park Service has a memorandum of understanding with the American Society of Landscape Architects, I connected them with the Louisiana chapter, and Daniels and Brown worked with the group so they could get a plan started. It was their first plan. And then they transitioned to, let me see if I can move on to the next. Oh, just so you know, the Lafitte Corridor Greenway is a 3.1-mile long strip. It's a strip, but the actual path that we're working is about 2.6 miles, and it's going to be a multi-use trail, a linear park, and it connects the French Quarter to Bayou St. John and to Mid-City. And just so that you understand the water connection, because really the water in that area is pretty much existent due to subsidence years ago, and so there's no water that carries along that area. But in the past, it connected to the Mississippi River and Lake Pontchartrain. But as I said, we've worked with the group, they've gotten that plan, and now they've worked with the workshop, and actually today is the groundbreaking for the construction of this project, and it's expected to be approximately about 11 months to completion of the first part of the project. They've taken about
it's taking about $9.1 million. It will take $9.1 million to complete the majority of the project. And what RTCA has done, as I said, first is that memorandum of understanding with ASLA, but then the second has been that of connecting the community stakeholders with the city. That's the most of what we've done, because somewhere in the process there had been a breakdown of communication of what those who live in that area, those businesses, all of those people, what they wanted, what the city could afford, and what the city envisioned as to what they thought would be a successful project in that area. A great benefit of working in this community is it is so very diverse with older citizens, younger citizens, blacks and whites. Many people are moving there because of the history of the neighborhood and how close it is to the French Quarter. Because, of course, when people think of New Orleans, they think of the French Quarter and they connect it to the partying, the food, the everything, all of that. So this area is prime real estate to do a lot of rebuilding. And because of our association with this project, in about 2012, Secretary of Interior Ken Salazar came down, and it also garnered a lot of national attention in addition to what was already going on locally. And a lot of businesses started saying, well, what can we do here? Can we bring some bikes? Can we set up canoeing and kayaking shops and all of this along the corridor? So a lot more interest has come about with it. However, we still have to be cautious about so many outsiders coming in to take over an area where residents, have already established relationships, friendships, all of that. So the Park Service has been very instrumental in making sure that we gauge, what's going on. We're not the boss of anyone, but we're making sure we've assisted in making sure that the lines of communication have been open so that, as I said before, all of the ideas are articulated effectively. If you see on that slide on the right, there were about 24 meetings held where we dealt with as I said, community residents and people, and we had them all sides of town. Mainly they're at churches and different times of the day, and to make sure that we were getting the information out from everyone of what they wanted in their area. And the way that we work a great deal with the youth community is to make sure that we bring up all the things that keep us active, like this bicycling and their participation and allowing them to be a part of, let me see if I included it in this slide. No. Well, in one of the workshops, these classrooms, we've even had youth, very young groups, even working with elementary schools, middle schools, to make sure that their ideas were also posted when we would have these design charrettes. When we work with churches, we speak about the spiritual component, the health. Most of the time when I work with these communities, I deal with the health component because that's mostly what people who have not had an interest in outdoor recreation have been involved in. People want to say, well, I don't ride bikes, I don't go on canoes, kayaks, all of that. How can this benefit me? Well, we're saying, hey, we'll be able to walk around. We're setting up baseball fields, all of these things in this area, and so that the health component is really, really important. If you see some of these, you can see the existing land use, and then you can see the proposed land use. And it's also important to mention that this project is supposed to kind of parallel the Dutch concept, where they make use there when they've had much more water in the area, so that people aren't so afraid to be around the water, and that they see that, hey, if we're going to live in this bowl-like situation, that we make the water our ally and see how we can design. I'm sorry?
You see, it sounds like we lost your connection momentarily there.
You lost me?
No, you're back. Go ahead.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. I don't know where I was lost. So do you know exactly where I was lost?
You're talking about the differences in the land use reflected by the photos, the graphic.
Okay, and then, I don't know if you heard me say about that we're paralleling it to the Dutch concept for the most part. Yeah, so it's pretty much the same thing. And so that we understand that the water and that lack of the water, that we make benefit of being below sea level, because many of the times we always have to deal with street flooding and those types of issues. And we've also worked with, I worked with Doug years ago also with the establishment of Groundwork New Orleans. So also working with organizations, the ones with whom we worked with in the past, and newer organizations to start partnering in all of these communities, because that Groundwork New Orleans also deals with bioswales, the curb cuts, all of those things, all of that design in the area. And so we're trying to make sure as RTCA that we bring other organizations to this area so that we make this project an effective one. And so at the end, that's what I've said about us connecting them with ASLA. And the last thing, the most current action that we've been working on is trying to develop a conservancy for the project, because we have this friends group, but they don't have the capacity to build funds the way they're needed to manage a project of this size. And the city of New Orleans, although we've recovered a great deal, really can't afford a lot of the aspects of the project. So we're working with them. So we have meetings every 2 weeks, not all of us. Some of us have meetings every 2 weeks to figure out these strategies for seeing how can we get another group to help manage it, or to have them all manage together, or set up an organization to receive funds so that we'll be able to keep the project going on. And we actually modeled it after we're trying to model it after two projects there in Birmingham, the Railroad Park and the Vulcan Park organization. And so we are taking like some of the concepts they used with working with the city. So that's like our last big task that RTCA is doing with Lafitte Corridor. And back at you, Doug, or Catherine.
Thank you, Stacy. And we're going to open this up for questions after Catherine completes her presentation. Catherine will be talking about the Montopolis watershed trails in Austin, Texas. Catherine?
All right. Hello, everybody. So you'll see that the image there is after a rain, and that area is fairly boggy during those events, and most of the time in our drought conditions of Texas, it isn't that wet. But it's owned by the City of Austin Watershed Protection Department for this kind of purpose, to allow water to stand there. This neighborhood group is the one that came to us because they were a fairly new kind of, infill neighborhood backing up to this, I'm going to call it a derelict area because no one was doing anything with it, and it was sort of a dump site for not just, people driving their trucks back there and dumping out materials, but also the waterborne trash that would come down from the creeks into that area. So these folks, came into an already existing neighborhood with a small area of new houses, and they said, we would like to have this area turn into something nice. So it was a neighborhood initiative, but primarily of the newcomers to that neighborhood, which gave us a bit of an effort in our typical outreach role. So the primary thing that I would say we did for this project was act as the sort of facilitator, go-between between 4 different city departments. They either had land there or they had jurisdiction there. It was the watershed department. There was a tiny park with baseball fields. There was the public works that does the bikeway planning and the neighborhood planning department as well. All of those had a role in at least what the citizen group wanted them to have a role in. And so a lot of it was the reluctance of city departments being asked to come on board with something that they weren't quite sure about. In fact, it was one of the city folks that had met us on another project that said, you should probably call these National Park Service community planners so that y'all can formulate your ideas into something more specific, because they were kind of pecking away at the city departments without really having a well-conceived plan of what they wanted to have in this watershed area. So we helped them with a trail planning workshop, and it produced 3 sets of recommendations. We had the nature trail component that kind of wound around through the and then we had a through trail idea that would connect a transit stop on a major thoroughfare that was headed to the airport, down through this green space and into downtown through some other trails that were already existing. And so we helped these groups, decide what they wanted to recommend and then put it in a format that the city departments could respond to. And there were 2 or 3 different small funding things. This was an area of about, I'll say 60 or 80 acres, some public, some private, that we were targeting for this system of trails. So it wasn't a huge area, and it had a lot of environmental issues like invasive species and the trash issues that had been there accumulating over many, many years when people had sort of turned their back on this area. And then so they had a lot of volunteer activities with, different groups and businesses, and we also helped with coordinating those activities. The results that came out of this were about a mile of natural surface trail, and our trail builders were the group of young people there with an AmeriCorps, Environmental Corps, pretty skilled in trail building, and we were able to help find some money for them, both through a Park Service Challenge Cost Share program, and also they were receiving funding from the National Rec Trail Program, and then the Austin Parks Foundation is a local group that disperses small amounts of money. So the total budget for what was done back there in that 60, 80 acres was $26,000. Now the through trail is a recommendation that's been incorporated into the Public Works plan for a hard surface transportation trail that won't come online for several more years, but it's in the works, and at least this group got their idea saluted. And then we had some shoring up of the creek. They've had quite a number of trash pickup days, which also involved city departments coming with dumpsters and ways to carry it out after the volunteers picked it up. And one of the property owners back there donated 24 acres that became part of the overall project site. So one thing I would conclude about some of our urban issues is that they're small in scale many times, particularly because of the nature of urban areas being, walkable, bikeable. People often have their sights on something that's close to home, and it also might be an area that's been kind of neglected, so that if you've got your visioning eyes, you can say, we could make that a better place and make it useful for our neighborhood. And I think this group feels like they succeeded in that. And we were glad that there was a youth involvement, and that youth core group has been back for a number of years with different kinds of cleanups. And there's a historic Freedman's Cemetery also next to this property, and it became, an area of shoring up the tombstones that had been knocked over, covered with vines, and they've helped with a community effort to clean up the cemetery as well. So a lot of it, I would say, is the passion of people to see what's near their homes that they could make better. And then for us, I think our biggest role in this area was getting the city to listen to the neighborhood group. That's pretty much what I have to say about that.
Thank you, Catherine. And so with this, Anne-Marie, I'd like to open it up to see if anybody has any questions about these projects or the general overview of the Rivers and Trails program before going on to the application process.
That would be great. Anybody with some questions there? One of the questions that I actually had was, in terms of each one of the projects, just to give people a sense for the sort of total amount of time that, let's say, you spent, Catherine or Stacy or Charlie, or the project over like how, a year. I know that these are very different projects, but maybe just specifics so that people can understand sort of how much your role was, and maybe the about the effort that you think the assistance was in the way of dollars that otherwise they didn't have to spend.
Shall we work backwards? Catherine, do you want to take a shot at this?
Well, our typical approach to taking projects on is a 2-year time commitment, and I wish I could say that as small of an area as this was, we could get it done in a year, but we probably spent about 25% of a planner's time allocated to this project over each year, and our time is basically what we contribute. I don't have a dollar value set aside for that, but this was I think $26,000 was what got raised to implement the pieces that got done, and the city coordination part, I think, was the more time-consuming part.
Great.
Stacy, do you have a thought on this?
I don't have, as Catherine, I don't know how to do it where we figure out the time. The first time that I assisted this group, they were not officially a project of mine. So even though we saw it as a consultation, it wasn't really a consultation on our books, because sometimes we can assist where it's not going to take away from any of our projects. But the document that they received initially was valued at over $125,000 for that first batch of assistance. Now I've been working with them for going on 3 years, and as Catherine said, yes, we usually like to stay around 2 years. So we're working on phasing my efforts out of it right now, especially, as I said, they just started construction today and moving straight into implementation. The reason that we've been remaining in this project is because it was significant nationally within the Urban Waters program. So it was imperative that we remained as long as we could give them any assistance. So it takes up, as I said, I meet about every 2 weeks, and then I work in between that time. So I can't put the value on it, but just so you have an idea, that's about
good.
how much. Yeah.
I would say it's invaluable.
Well, I'll accept that.
Charlie, do you have some thoughts on your time and value in New Bedford?
Well, I like the invaluable part for sure, but like the others, this project, I look at my involvement to be, the total will be about 2 years, and each year maybe 20 to 30% of my time. And part of that also is helping part of the value for us is helping the groups get various grants related to it. This particular Water Trails project is not a really big money one. But so that hasn't been so much of an issue. But it is something that we certainly focus on, is knowing the kinds of grants that make sense for whatever project it is and helping groups to get them.
And I would say 30% of Charlie Tracy is worth at least 2 other people across of planners elsewhere. Any other questions?
Can you tell, this is Deanna from River Network, so some of these community workshops and charrettes, what's the role that the RTCA staff is playing in those? Are you actually helping facilitate the meetings, plan and do logistics for such events, finding sites, et cetera, or more coordinating while all the community partners are playing those different roles? And it may be a mix, I don't know.
Opening it up to all 3?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, for my ordinary projects, I usually help facilitate that meeting or those workshops, and that involves the logistics. We bring in paper, pens, all of that. But for this Lafitte Corridor project, the city had already had a contract with Design Workshop, so they facilitated these 24 charrettes. And so when I was in attendance, I was only in attendance on behalf of the Park Service to make sure that we had a presence and to see if there were any questions regarding it. So I was actually assisting them during this project.
Charlie?
On the SoCo Blueways project, I facilitated the first couple of workshops that we had, but in the process tried to identify other groups that would, that would be partners as well that could help to do that. So now we switch it around. But in general, I think our role, it varies. We really try to figure out what the project needs and fill that rather than bring in a sort of a cookie cutter approach.
Catherine, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I would say on this particular workshop, we had the local people's role was helping us get the invitation list together because they knew best, who were the local stakeholders. We made sure that we had each of the city departments sending somebody, so a little bit of arm twisting. And we divided the groups up into three, and I had two graduate students assisting that, the three of us kind of led. Each of the trail workshop had a field assessment component to it. So we facilitated each of those three groups and then came back at the end and facilitated that and the collection of the ideas. So we were pretty hands-on with this particular one. In between, workshops, we have smaller meetings with fewer of the kind of a steering committee, and I may help with the agenda, but I'm not likely to lead the whole meeting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
A comment I'd like to make is that for the Rivers and Trails program, when we take on a project, we also are looking at what is our exit strategy, because it's not about the Park Service taking this project on for the long term. Mm-hmm. It's about helping it up to the next step so that the folks who are there and who have the passion for the project can continue to move it forward. And so our role, as Charlie mentioned, is very focused on what needs to be done that isn't happening at that particular moment, and then also making sure that the capacity is there for the group that is developing the project to carry it forward in the future.
Great. So, Stacy, do you see the question there from Barbara Good for Lafitte implementation phase? Where is the funding coming from?
Let me see. For the Lafitte Corridor Implementation Fund, right now it's from the city. There are still some Katrina recovery dollars. How that's being doled out specifically, I'm not sure. There was a large amount. We have an EPA representative there working with, he's actually housed in the City of New Orleans office, so he knows the specifics of it, but I know that there were Katrina dollars left over that had a deadline to be filled. So the first amount that came from that block funding, as I said, is used for environmental remediation, but the implementation fund comes from the city dollars and that of some of what remains. I want to say that it was either 34 or 42 million remaining, but that's not all for this project. I'm saying it comes from that, remaining. Those remaining dollars.
Okay, and then Michael has a question that Doug would lead us into the application process, which is, could the RTCA, could you discuss the best ways to get the ball rolling for a possible application in terms of contacting the local rep or first to explore the project ideas? So why don't you go ahead and move on to the application, then we can take questions at the end as well.
Okay. Michael, thanks for the transition. On to the RTCA application process. So as I mentioned earlier, who may apply? And you can see state, local agencies, tribes, nonprofit organizations, citizens groups. What's important in the application is that folks come together. And so if you can have government, nonprofit, and citizens groups coming together in the application process and demonstrating support, that makes it a more attractive project for the National Park Service. How to apply? most importantly, is to build the support within your own community for the project. So consulting with your partners, with the folks who are stakeholders for where the project is going to take place, certainly with your government officials and potential funders. So you want to start building the base of support for that project and for inviting the National Park Service in. In some areas, the National Park Service is not that welcome because it's a federal agency. And so it's important that people are comfortable with the idea of the Park Service coming in and providing assistance. And so that's something you need to talk about with your community if that's an issue. The next important thing is to contact the RTCA staff in your area to discuss the project, because they will be able to give you feedback on whether or not it's a good project for RTCA, for the type of assistance that you're looking for, and also they can give you guidance on how to pull together the application package itself and answer your questions. The other issue about working with RTCA staff is, though we're a national program, each region has its own flavor, and so it's best to be in touch with the staff in your region to find out what peculiarities they may have in the application process or the types of projects that their staff are best to assist with. Then the next step is to compile the RTCA application package and submit it by August 1st. Projects are reviewed over the next couple months and selected, and work would then begin with the new fiscal year for the federal government, which is October 1st, unless there's a shutdown or there's no budget, and then it has to wait until the federal budget is approved. The application package includes the application itself, and then information on the project site, so a location map, some background information, and then pretty important are the letters of support, which I alluded to earlier, of building support within your community for taking this on and for inviting in the National Park Service. And an important part of the application package, or talking about the project, is what are the specific goals and anticipated results that you will be aiming for, and more importantly, what is the role for RTCA? And the clearer you can be about that, the better it is for RTCA to understand if that's the right role for it to be playing, and then be able to talk about it with you. The other component for the selection criteria is broad community support, which I've already alluded to, and that the project will advance the mission of NPS. And the Park Service has key objectives that it is trying to accomplish, not only in the national parks themselves and the way it delivers services to the American people, but also through the RTCA program. Some of those are improving access to parks and recreation and conserved natural resources. Another one is engaging youth. Another one is making connections with national parks themselves from a community. So there's a number of objectives that NPS is embarking on as part of its 100th anniversary, which is going to be celebrated in 2016. So if you can couch your project in those objectives, then that strengthens your application. So for more information, the best thing to do to get started is to go to the RTCA website, and www.nps.gov/RTCA. And then from there you can find the regional contacts for RTCA, and those are the folks that you want to talk to as soon as possible if you have an idea, and start to get them involved in your thinking. And then you'll find the other materials you need. You'll also see descriptions of projects that RTCA has been involved in across the country, some neat videos, and they also have a frequently asked questions section. So that completes the overview of the application process. Any questions about that or about the projects or overview of RTCA that we gave you?
About how many new projects do you accept? I'm sorry if did you mention that already on an annual basis?
Oh boy, I don't know. For an example, well, maybe each of us can handle it for our region. Charlie, how many new projects did the Northeast region, which is from Virginia up to Maine, take on last year? Was it like 150 or 200?
Sorry, I'm drawing a blank on that, but
Okay.
I was thinking maybe around 70, but I'm not positive.
Or maybe that was the number of applications we had last year. I think that's where the 200 number comes from. I think 70 is more correct, Charlie. You're right. Stacy, do you have a thought of how many projects your region took on last year?
Yeah, because I was getting nervous when you said 200. I'm like, we're not doing enough. Okay, so we're probably about 25.
We're overachievers up here.
I see. We're about 24 to 32, but it really just depends on how for us, about how our projects are rolling out. If we've got enough time, because we don't just accept them. Even the good ones, sometimes we have to pass them on to the next year. So this fiscal year, I think we accepted about 27, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And Stacy's in the Southeast region, which goes from Louisiana east to Georgia and Florida and up to North Carolina.
And Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands. Yeah, all of those.
And Catherine, do you have an idea for your region, which is the Intermountain region?
Boy, I am stumped on that. I'm going to say in Texas we have, I think, about 17, and, we've probably got 6 states, and I'm guessing everybody's got, around 8 or 10 per state. So, if we did 10 on the average, I'd say we have about maybe 80. That's way off the top of my head. And those are continuing as well as new ones. So we like, as a rule of thumb, to have about half our projects continuing and half our projects new. So I would say that would be kind of a round number of what gets taken on new-wise.
This is Anne Marie. Do you have a sense for how many are sort of urban, how many rural, how many suburban, or any breakout like that?
No. I will say that there is a real interest in RTCA to increase the number of work it does in urban communities and the number of communities with diverse populations. It's also a goal of the National Park Service to increase the service it provides to urban areas. So urban is very hot right now in the National Park Service.
And I wanted to ditto that, what Doug said, because on our work plans, it's specifically for ours. I don't know if it's the same for Charlie and Catherine, but it specifically says that we are to go to these communities to make sure that people know about our program. So each time we were speaking with our supervisor, she wants to know that we've attempted to go to these communities that might not know about our program.
Any other questions about the webinar?
Doug, I just had Anne Marie again. We know who's in the room and who signed up, and there are a few people that didn't make it. I just want to let people know that we did record this, so if you want to go back and look at it, we'll notify people. And we will be giving the people who were registered to Doug's team. Did you want to follow up with anything specific, or just so that they know how to contact you if they can't find what they need?
Are you asking that question of me?
Yep, to you.
The reason I was interested in who participated was to provide that information to our each region, so that if they get an inquiry from you, that they'll know where it's coming from. But if you're having trouble finding out who to contact in your region, you're welcome to send me an email or contact me through Anne Marie.
Right. And Michael's next question, are RTCA reps generally knowledgeable about the Urban Waters Learning Network?
I would say no, but as part of my email sharing with the staff who participated on this webinar, I can certainly mention to them about the Urban Waters Learning Network, but I don't think that would have any kind of impact on their evaluation of the project at this point.
Well, that's terrific. I think you may have another question here coming up. We really want to thank you, Doug and team, Catherine, Charlie, and Stacy. They're great projects, and I know we had a wonderful time with you guys. The other thing I just wanted to let people know is that we will be having another webinar in May, which is on social media, creating lasting connections. And I wanted to also make sure and remind people that if you want to contact people after this webinar, whether it's Doug and team or other people that are Urban Waters Learning Network folks, if you've remembered a program that somebody's doing, remember that those people are all on Basecamp, and you can get their emails that way. It's sort of a Urban Waters contact list at your service.
Oh, and I'm on Basecamp, so I can be reached through that.
Exactly. Any other last questions for anybody? Well, team, thank you much. Doug, Catherine,
Thank you.
Stacy, Charlie.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. And if anybody has questions and can't reach Doug, get a hold of Deanna or myself, and we'll make sure that you get to them. Have a great rest of your week.